Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hi-Fi Summit, Q4 2020, kicking it off with Terry Medalen from Primare. How are you doing, Terry? And of course, you guys know Joe and Mike. What's up, everybody?
What's going on?
Doing very well, thank you.
Hey, Terry, good to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
Much better. I got coffee now, finally. Let's go.
Let's go.
He's right.
Coffee.
Backstage, we were talking about Terry's coffee regimen. He has quite an extensive daily coffee routine. It's pretty interesting. And you're all the way in Sweden, is that correct?
Yeah, and coffee's king in Sweden, so, and queen probably. So it only falls into place that I am with that coffee regimen. But yeah, it's a religion here.
Very cool. Very cool.
We got in the chat right here. David Solomon says hi. Let's see here.
Everybody's starting to trickle in. That's right. We are live. Okay.
Here we've got people streaming from YouTube and Facebook, and
that's right.
What we got. So pretty much there's about 6 different places that they're kind of joining in. So good to see everybody this morning.
All right. And like I was saying, Terry, after this, stick around. I'm going to drop a link in the private chat here so that you can join the VIP area and have a talk with us back there.
Sounds great.
Lenny from MoFi is in the house as well. St. Louis. Oh, Tidal Connect. Were they listening to us backstage?
I know, right?
Yeah. Did you guys know?
I know Frederick well. Frederick's here from Southern Sweden here.
So. Oh, very cool. Hey, Frederick. Good to see you, man.
All right. Who here has heard of Primare before? Because I know I heard about it. Yes, you do. You have. I heard about it back at Expona a while back. Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool. Nice looking stuff. I'm sure you can go into more detail about it, right?
Well, that I can. And we have been known now for a long time for that kind of elegant, simple Scandinavian design. Both simple in the number of buttons for lack of complexity then, and control, as well as keeping the faceplate simple and elegant to allow it to integrate into any environment. And part of that is part of our practical design approach. We did that little film for the summit here that talks about that in brief, but the idea would be, I can talk about it in a little more detail now. And that practical design approach actually comes from kind of a cultural phenomenon here in Sweden, and it's something called lagom. And lagom is one of those horrible words that are hard to translate, because in part here in Sweden it means so much. And in brief, it kind of means not too much, not too little, everything in balance and proportion. And it has all kinds of aspects. I mean, it filters through every aspect of Swedish culture, even on the social level, where one person is not better than another. You're not better than them, they're not better than you. And oddly enough, there's some negative aspects to the thought that may stymie innovation. And yet here I am in Malmö, Sweden, that not too many years ago was ranked the 4th most innovative city in the world. And so there's all kinds of things happening kind of in the dynamic around lagom that presents this ability to balance out what's most important in any design to kind of reach the goal that we have of providing the best possible experience for the greatest number of people. And so I can go through all of the various aspects of that, or if you guys want to guide me a little, that's fine too. Just let me know if you want me to continue chatting away, because that I can do very easily.
I think we're just intrigued, man.
Look
just
at this stuff.
Stop there. Go back up. Go back to the interior design.
It's gorgeous.
It is. Thank you for noticing that, because one of the things that is of critical importance to us is a simple signal path. The shortest possible simple signal path. And when you look at this design, it's informed by a 4-layer circuit board for the audio input. And so at the top of that image to the right is the input section, then to the left is the output section. And you'll notice that there is only a single signal carrying wire bundle in that entire amplifier. That whole bottom half is just the power supply, the APF-C power supply we use to feed the power to our UFPD2 output module. And there's only a single bundle of wire, and that's this wire here. There's only 10 centimeters of signal carrying wire in the entire amplifier, and that's true for our integrated amplifiers as well for the A35.2 amplifier here, basic amplifier. And all of that is meant to eliminate as much as possible any noise or distortions that might occur from having wiring, signal carrying wiring running through the amp.
Are you talking about this right here?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
This is the only wire, signal carrying wire. Wow, okay.
That's it. And in fact, in the 15 series amps, there is no wire. We're able to design that so that all the modules align and they effectively click together, so to speak, without having the benefit of any wire at all. And so by doing that, by shortening the signal path, and we do this in every possible effort, every possible way, we just get what we believe is truer fidelity.
Sure.
And it just simply works. In fact, some people will comment on that 4-layer circuit board seemingly as if it were very complex, like playing 3D chess. When in actual fact, according to our engineer Bent, it actually makes his life much easier to be able to create that short signal path, have a complete ground layer that eliminates noise, transfer of noise between the elements, and it really opens up all the possibilities for him to allow for the shortest possible signal path and eliminating a number of wires.
You know, do you want to know what attracted me to click on this? It was this. 800 watts of power in bridged mono mode. That's what I was like, whoa, I got to see this thing. Like,
and you can hold it in the palm of your hand. It's still very lightweight because of the Class D power technology. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But now, before you get too excited about that, and here's where the Swedish side comes in.
There's a caveat. Okay, what's that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's you get nothing for free in this horribly conflicted world of AV manufacturing, audio video manufacturing. When you have a bridged amplifier, you have to understand that you're having the impedance load that normally would be presented by the speaker. So if you have a 4-ohm load speaker, that bridged amplifier all of a sudden is seeing a 2-ohm load at the speaker. And that can kind of be difficult, particularly if that isn't a fairly linear 4-ohm load for any amplifier to drive. And so while 800 watts is very impressive, we always caution people when it comes to specification. In fact, you've kind of allowed me to step up on my soapbox and talk about this idea of specifications and measurements. Because in a lot of cases, we can find specifications, measurements to be often more misleading than they can be helpful. So even though this is 800 watts at 8 ohms and sounds very impressive, you might actually be better not bridging it into 800 watts, keeping it at the 200 watts, and doing a vertical biamping with this amp. And so vertical biamping is if you have a speaker that allows for bi-wiring, you essentially take a single channel, a single amplifier, and you devote it to, say, the left channel. Right. And then you have one of the stereo outputs from that speaker driving the tweeter, one driving the woofer. And the benefit of that is that you optimize the power supply's performance while maintaining a higher impedance load for the amplifier to drive. And so you actually get better overall performance as a result of that. So always be a little bit suspicious of specifications, even our own, with the idea that there is a sense that ultimately they don't really tell us what the amplifier or the product will really sound like.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. Now that's a great idea, this vertical biamp. So you would, in essence, need one amplifier per speaker, right? Right.
Yeah. And obviously the speaker would be able to be bi-wired, have inputs for upper frequencies and lower frequencies. But that gives you all of these options and able to kind of mix and match how the systems work. And so many of our components are designed that way to kind of slot in and play a very specific but flexible role when you're system building, because it is often the case of being able to tie all of this stuff together in a meaningful way that produces the best performance. Yeah, and so you see the system building image there, where those products, the 35, the 25 series, many of them are modular in nature. So you can have an integrated amplifier or a preamplifier that's fully analog, or you can load it up with a digital analog conversion stage or our Prisma network player module and have a complete control and connection center within the integrated amplifier or the preamplifier. Or it can be a case that, say, into our CD35 CD player that you see there, second from the bottom, you can either have that as just a straight, more traditional CD player, or plug in the Prisma module in that, and then that becomes your complete digital music center, both for stored, streamed, or CD playback, disc playback. And then that way you can keep, say, the preamplifier all analog if that's what you prefer. And so there are these ways in which we allow you to kind of mix and match and fit the needs of your system, hopefully, as fully as you might desire. And so you see the Prisma module there on the back now with the antennas coming out of it. And so that's the CD35 Prisma with that network module. And the network module, the Prisma module itself, is designed in a way that's somewhat unique. We have a lot of experience, or have had a lot of experience, in designing control applications early on, being an early adopter of streaming media. And what we discovered is that trying to keep pace with all of the updates and changes that came along with the operating systems, as well as in the streaming services themselves, the streaming applications themselves, is a case where you had to respond to all of these updates in a way that was very difficult and problematic for a company like ours. And so what we adopted was to base Prisma on effectively two things. Our Prisma application that can control, say, a NAS drive connected to the system, as well as then to be able to set up the individual product. But when we start streaming, we kind of go with a backbone of Chromecast that allows us to incorporate hundreds of streaming music services around the world. We're an international company, and in many cases, many of the streaming services you might be familiar with are not available in certain countries. Other streaming services might be, and Chromecast allows us access to those around the world. And then to that, we add AirPlay, we add Bluetooth, and Spotify Connect. And at some point in the future, when we get done with our complete rebuild of Prisma, we'll add Spotify Connect to that. I'm sorry, Tidal Connect to that group of access points. And so by doing that, by basing it on Chromecast and essentially having our customers access the application from the app itself. So in other words, if you're playing Tidal, you don't play it from our Prisma application. You simply go to the Tidal app, play it directly from their application, and then you cast it or stream it using Chromecast to our Prisma-enabled products. And that allows not only for direct connection, but it also means that many of the updates are a bit more transparent to the end user, and therefore there aren't some of these unintended consequences that can cause things to kind of not function the way you want them to. But it doesn't necessarily avoid completely some of these issues. For example, I don't know if you guys are Apple users, but iOS 13 went through 18 updates in less than a year. And some of those were meaningless or less than meaningful to many users. But in one case, much to our surprise, if you typed in a Serbian alphabet character, either in the track title, the album title, or the artist's name, it would cause Spotify to seize. How to find this is an incredibly difficult task. The nice thing is that we didn't have to find it because people are connecting with the Spotify app. It was up to these much larger software engineering corporations to handle that. And so they were able to recognize it very quickly. In fact, I was really kind of surprised at how fast they were able to make that happen. But the other thing, and if there was a tip I could give to people, if you have streaming applications, particularly with iOS, with Apple, there have been so many updates coming that in a lot of cases you will be better off if you delete your applications. Let's say delete your Tidal application and reload it.
Gotcha.
Re-download it after,
Yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. The update process, both for Apple and for Tidal, should incorporate all this. But we're finding that kind of for them to completely kind of lock together, that deleting and reloading can be a really important aspect to getting them working well again, kind of getting them all sorted out.
Well,
and that's kind of true for all of these streaming products. We tend to forget, and you're allowing me to ramble on, so I'll continue until you stop.
Go ahead.
One of the interesting things that we're discovering with streaming products is we tend to forget that they're computers, that they're all little computers. And we allow our other computers, the computers that we think of as computers, we allow those to be turned off and turned on, or effectively rebooted almost daily. And yet with our high-end audio products, particularly given the need for performance, the desire is to simply leave them on all the time. And the issue then can happen is that you occasionally should be rebooting any of your streaming products to get them to kind of just realign themselves, to kind of reset the MCU and CPUs and get them to work well. And that's true of routers as well. Rebooting your router on a regular basis is a great idea to be able to have better connectivity all the time.
You know,
in fact, updating your router, most of us don't update our routers, and that can be an issue as well. Not only for systems.
like I'm like hearing this for the first time. Update my
Mine
router.
does it automatically.
Oh
so
yeah,
it's okay.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and what's interesting too is that so many people, I'm using the router provided by my ISP, by my internet service provider, and in some cases, some of us have been given those routers many
years ago.
And many of them are unable to handle the client requests that are coming in from a modern household. A modern household will have enough clients on it, meaning mobile devices, computers, internet connectivity. It is equivalent to an office network that would have an IT expert to handle
totally.
the result. And so that's one of the things why I'm really excited about Wi-Fi 6. I don't know if you guys are aware of Wi-Fi 6 coming. So we've got 2.4, we've got 5 gig wireless connection. So Wi-Fi 6 is coming, not to be confused with 5G connection.
Right.
And there's higher speed with Wi-Fi 6, but the great thing about Wi-Fi 6 is actually better connectivity.
Gotcha.
It's better able to handle consistent and a greater number of client requests. Because what can really happen in your streaming service is that you'll start streaming something, stream an album. And that album will take enough period of time while other people maybe in the household are connecting to the system for your router to go, okay, I'm at my limit. I've reached my 6 client request limit. I haven't seen anything from this streaming thing for a while. I'm going to turn that off so that I can handle the requests from these other clients. And then you go to your streaming app and all of a sudden things are playing, but it's not connected to the network, and it can be quite frustrating. And so the easy thing to do is, of course, just to close out and reopen the app, and it usually straightens itself out. But with Wi-Fi 6, that shouldn't happen anymore. So my recommendation to everyone, once you've bought your Primare Prisma product, of course, is to go out and invest in a good router, and preferably one with Wi-Fi 6. And then it gets better.
On top of that,
on top of that, the key is it's funny because we have a very flat management system at Primare, and so while I'm marketing lead, I'm also part of product development, and I also do customer service, which is really great for when you're doing marketing and product development to get all of these kinds of information in. And one of the things that I'm finding is that in some of even the most sophisticated audio systems with cabling and power conditioning and the kind of thing that kind of makes me jealous, even though I have a pretty nice system, you then start talking about their network system, and it is as if it has never been touched. That it was installed at a certain point, and someone may be using Wi-Fi or using Ethernet. They're using the Ethernet cable that came with their router, without fully understanding or appreciating how you can actually improve the system rather inexpensively for streaming, to improve streaming quality, by doing something as simple as adding better Ethernet cables or a switch. And the weird thing is that I know that there'll be some computer guys out there that'll go, okay, adding a switch to the network system can't possibly improve streaming quality or sound quality. But our experience is that even an inexpensive switch put in between the router and then used solely as a dedicated switch for your sound system seems to, this may not be the right reason, but seems to isolate the system from the rest of the activity on the router and allow then all of the streaming capacity to be just better informed, better in control. And then you're seeing this now, and it's really funny, I find myself recommending an $800 switch to go with our $500 streaming player, network player. But what you're going to see now is more and more of these advanced audiophile grade switches coming out there. And it's one of those cases where if you get the chance to hear one and hear what it does for streaming, you'll be very impressed. Because right at the moment, CD still, in my opinion, our opinion, still sounds better than most streaming quality that people are getting. who haven't maybe attended to all of the details of setting up that network system. That's not to say it can't sound amazing when it's properly done. In fact, we're working on a setup technique where you get a switch with 4 separate Ethernet cables to connect everything together to make it all sound even better than it could possibly be. But that is the reason, I think, why CD players still can sound better, because people need to attend to their network system as a kind of component part. And again, that gets us back to logom and the practical design approach. Everything has to be balanced. Everything has to kind of, you can't have not too much, not too little of this or that in order to really make everything work better or work at its optimum.
So earlier you're talking about the wireless router. So basically you're saying if you have an issue with a Primare product, it's probably your router. Don't call us.
Or that we have an update coming.
Update, reboot first. And then call it. No, I thought that was cool that you guys are using Chromecast though, because I use some Chromecast audio, and I have a lot of Chromecast devices around here. And it's sometimes I might be on a site where I want to play the song, and there's no way to kind of connect that. And so, with Chromecast, you can kind of just stream anything that's playing on this particular phone. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. Another thing somebody mentioned that these have 3 feet.
Yeah.
What's going on over here?
Well, that's part of logom as well.
The design philosophy.
Yeah, it's part of the practical design philosophy. So 3 points define a plane. So regardless of how level the surface is, how flat the surface is, if you have 3 points, you set something down on it, it'll be stable, it'll be level. And so we use 3 feet because we think 4 is 1 too many. 2 is 1 too few.
Exactly.
And so 3 is just the right amount, or logom. Nice. And of course, the great thing too is that it saves us 25% in feet costs.
There you go.
So logom has all kinds of benefits. Now, it can be a problem if you're going to connect some stuff and you happen to put your hand on that back corner.
Right.
So that you have to be a little bit afraid of, a little bit careful of. The other thing too is that it makes it even easier to kind of play around with isolation feet. Makes it very easy then to just slip a foot in the front, a couple in the back, kind of play around with it that way. It works really nicely. And the feet we've designed with the feet we use are really good, but that doesn't mean that some of the wonderful isolation feet that are available out there can't provide benefits.
I went with 5 feet.
I'm sorry?
The
A32, we had to have 5 feet.
5.
Oh, okay. See, like this looks like it's floating. Like
that looks
the back, it just looks like it's floating. That's kind of cool.
Wild.
Are those knobs metal? That's all I need to know.
Joe's a big proponent on knob feel. It's a big deal for him. Oh,
so are we. And those knobs have kind of become iconic as they've developed over the years. They're definitely metal. They're inset. We spend a lot of time, and it seems weird to talk about it, but we spend a lot of time on. Sorry, I can't. There's no other word for it. Knob feel.
Yeah.
And just how it feels in your hand. So the length of it, how far it comes out from the front, its diameter, the resistance that falls to your hand when you turn the control. It's the same with the buttons. We spent a considerable amount of time in both their size, how far they come out from the front of the faceplate, the level of resistance that it takes, and then the feel to acknowledge that they've actually been. Then the connection, the change has been made. All of that falls into our design philosophy, even our display. And some people will accuse us in this day and age where people are putting on massive color front panel displays that in our kind of Swedish practical design approach hearts, we see that as rather sluttish window dressing and maybe not result in the longest term use value. And so what I mean by that is this. We adopted OLEDs really early on, first generation OLEDs. And if you know anything about OLED design, it's essentially a vacuum seal. And at the end of manufacturing, to one degree or another, that seal will begin to erode. And it's kind of true of your OLED TVs. I just pointed to mine that you can't see. But there's this wonderful clarity to the display. And so what we discovered early on is that there could be reliability issues. And so we had to search and search and search, and finally came up with a 4th generation display from the automobile industry that was tested at extreme temperatures of heat and cold, with the idea that it should last the projected lifetime of the product. It should never fail. And more importantly, if I'm 2 meters or 6 feet from my product, I'm not going to see what's on even the biggest display in any clear fashion. And more importantly, I have the control right here in the palm of my hand. I have this beautiful retina display right here in the mobile device that I can see even with my bad old eyes very, very clearly right here. And so the idea of putting in something on our front faceplate that may not be as simple, as elegant as it otherwise might be, as reliable for the long term as it might be, was counter to us. Now, we maybe should have put on a really lovely color display, but ultimately we feel much more comfortable with this kind of practice, this kind of development over time.
Hey, I like VU meters. Relax over there.
I know you do. I know you do.
I need those.
They're not going to add to improve the sound.
No.
But he just likes seeing them do this.
I know.
Because it gets his head moving.
You can get an app with a VU on it.
An app. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, listen, I grew up with analog tape recording on big reel-to-reel machines. Yeah, there's something about a VU meter that you just can't deny. No doubt about that.
You know, one thing I want to touch on is I noticed that some of your stuff is modular, so I think that's really cool. You know, if somebody has an older unit and then you've come up with, you know, some new tech, they don't have to just, you know, throw that out.
Well, be careful with that. And again, here comes the Swedish practical design approach. We do the modularity for system building predominantly because tech changes too fast these days. And so while that is the idea, one of the ideas behind modularity is to be able to provide updated modules as time and technology allows or permits. But ultimately, it's really there for system building, to add the components that you need as you want them. And so it is a case where that's its primary function. One of the things that you can get into trouble with, especially with products that we have which are very long-lived, our product life is 5 years or longer. We don't introduce a product just to feed the market with a new product. We only do it if we honestly feel that we've improved on every aspect of the previous model that a new model will replace. And so in the case of some of our earlier modular product, the connector, I forget the name now, the Molex connector that we use to connect our modular boards were no longer made and no longer available. And so even though we could have potentially made a new module with new technology, maybe even a Prisma board, for example, to go into some of our older units, we didn't have the basic physical connection point to be able to do that. And so to try to then rebuild each of these models to fit the new module would have been so expensive that it wouldn't make any sense. And so there, what we did is we designed this wonderful little product called the SC15 Prisma. Which in some ways we mistakenly called a preamplifier because it does have some preamplifier functions, but it's really a DAC network player. And we were able to put all of the new features that we could into this standalone product with its own metal box to shield it from noise, with its own dedicated power supply, that actually far outperforms any module we might have been able to design to put into the older product. And we were able to do that at exactly the same price as what a module would have cost. And so you're right, the idea of modularity is great, with the idea that we can add new technologies, and we're looking toward doing that as time goes on. But also the other weird thing about it is that so much of updating and new technologies are software based. So that so much of this updating, if you've got a network player like in any of our Prisma modules, so much of that update and new technology can be added essentially by an automatic over-the-air update, which is kind of astounding to me, that we have that capability to effectively transform a product. We're redesigning Prisma now, the Prisma operating platform. And when we're done, we'll have updated AirPlay, we'll have updated Bluetooth, we'll have updated Spotify Connect, Tidal, Chromecast. It will essentially be effectively a new, dare I say it, operating system for our network players. And we'll have done that all in the software domain. Will not have to change any hardware whatsoever. But as you suggest, the modularity is great for system building, and the idea that, who knows, we might come up with a new DAC technology that we want to slip in there, or maybe it'll be MQA added to the digital analog converter at some point. Then we can throw that in there, or especially with all the APIs coming out.
eARC, maybe some eARC.
I'm sorry?
Some eARC.
Well, yeah. Well, eARC we're playing around with for the new multi-channel products. So
Hey,
there it is. There it is.
that's what I want.
That's one of Joe's things, and you gotta have eARC these days. You gotta put eARC in there. Yeah. Couple of random questions. Well, I know I noticed. My favorite, the ESS Saber DACs. You guys are putting 8-channel DACs in these products. Yeah. That's kind of cool. That's awesome. I like that
for a long time.
Oh, cool.
It just kind of seems it's a natural outgrowth of being able to take fullest advantage of that DAC, using an 8-channel DAC to work in a balanced differential output kind of configuration. Just simply allows you to get the best possible performance. The weird thing, though, is that we also don't adopt any additional filtering that ESS chip actually allows or provides. We use it straight. And we found that just simply allows us to have this stable platform design, everything around it, the input as well as the output stage, that makes the most sense. And it is, again, that, not to beat the drum of simple circuit path, short signal path, but that is the kind of thing that it allows us to do. And so, we also feel that IC circuits can be used really productively, but by keeping them out of the signal path. So in the case of our volume control, we use a 4-channel IC control there to select the precise resistive values for the volume setting that you have. And that gives us all kinds of advantages because that IC is not in the signal path, so it doesn't have any harm for the signal going through the design.
Right.
It allows that perfect selection of the resistive value. It allows us to put a balance in there that has no adverse effects. So you are just selecting the precise resistive value for each channel. And it also means that regardless of what volume level you're at, you still get the same level of performance. It's not like the older potentiometers that you might be using that have that kind of variable performance as you move up and down or around that circle. It's also true of our Class D designs. We try to keep them as simple as possible. So our newest design, UFPD2, we could have easily snuck in 5 or 6 IC circuits into the signal path and reduced total harmonic distortion to wonderful levels. And as the marketing guy, I would love to be able to have this kind of thing to talk about. But in the end, what we found out is that if we eliminated those ICs, understood that the specification that we would get might be a little bit higher, by concentrating on a single really high performance IC, we have the budget now. Like with our 3 feet, have a little extra foot budget. If we're not using all these ICs in the Class D amplifier, we can use the best possible single component for the shortest signal path to not affect that signal any more than we have to. And so all of those choices are very carefully considered when we move through the design process.
Very cool. Couple of random other questions about like pricing. Another person asked, is this brand considered very high-end audio in Sweden?
In Sweden.
Only in Sweden.
Only in Sweden.
Only.
Yeah, in fact, actually, when you're born, you're handed the smallest of our Primare integrated.
Nice. That's awesome. It's like a rite of passage.
Exactly. And then when you graduate from high school, you get one of the bigger models.
Yeah, that's right. You get the big boy.
It's really cruel, though, that as you age, then we start taking some of that back as your hearing gets reduced.
No title for you.
Yeah, sorry. Your upper frequency hearing is gone. You don't need this quality anymore. The Swedish market is very sophisticated. So whatever is the highest level of audio around in the world, it's available here in Sweden. And I think there's a certain pride in Primare here in Sweden. Yeah, and it all depends upon your definition of what's high end. We're kind of taken aback at some of the prices that are being charged for some products. We understand the effort that goes into them, the design characteristics, the quality of the parts, and that they merit the price that is being asked for them. But we want to kind of inhabit this middle ground, so to speak. Again, our goal of providing the best possible experience to the greatest number of people. Our product is not inexpensive. There's no doubt about that. but it also isn't at the highest prices that are being charged lately. And we would, as modestly as we can, being Swedish, would suggest that we will perform at a level higher than even products more expensive than our own. We try to provide as great a value as we possibly can with our product, but there's no doubt that they're not necessarily inexpensive if you're not used to some of the higher price levels of some of the more sophisticated, shall we say, products out there. Pricing, if you want to check out pricing, you can go to our website. We have the pricing in euros on every page for every product. Now that pricing will be a little bit different in the US, obviously due to currency differences, import, etc. And so we will have that available there if you want to check that out.
What is that? What is that? What does it say? NP5? Is that what it?
Yeah, the MP5 Prisma.
Yeah. What is that exactly?
This little thing.
That's the network that he's been talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
that
Yeah.
integrates.
Oh, there it is.
Well, that's the NP5 Network Player 5 Prisma, and so we devised this for a number of different reasons. We wanted to be able to provide, particularly to our Primare users, the ability to add this new network player technology to even some of our oldest products. So anything that has a digital input, you can connect this NP5 Prisma network player and have the full Prisma control and connection network player capabilities that we have in even our upper level product. It's effectively the same circuit that's in our pre-35 Prisma, our more expensive preamplifier. And while there are some limitations by having an external box like this, it is with the idea that you get that full level of technology. And in fact, in the next weeks or so, hopefully before the end of the month of November, we'll actually have Rune Ready capability built into that one as well. And so for very little money, you can add some very sophisticated network playback, multi-room, multi-zone functionality, voice control. You can add all kinds of different features, all with just having a digital input. And for our older products that have, you'll see the RS-232 connector right there in the image right at the moment. You're able to take the RS-232, connect it to our older products using that control port. And so even basic functions that are part of the Prisma application, volume up and down, mute, input selection, sequential input selection, that can be added to these older products, some of which are 20 years old. And be able to do that as a service, particularly for those who adopted our early streaming technology and have been waiting for a long time for having an update. We also have a special program for those original adopters of our streaming service. So if someone bought a pre-32 with an MM30 media module in it, or i32 with a media module in it, or NP30 network player 30, or the pre-60 you see there in the video image window there that's on the screen, you can get it for half price.
Wow.
And that's a way of providing that long-awaited update for those users of those older technologies. And so that allows them then to be able to get to that level of technology and not have to necessarily leave behind equipment that still sounds great. And that's the other thing that we design for, is the long term. And so in a lot of cases, I'll be talking to people about their older amps with a suggestion or the desire on their part maybe to upgrade their electronics. And often we'll wind up suggesting maybe improvements to their shelving or cabling or the source that they might be using. Because in many cases, while our products keep getting better, it's a subtle improvement as time goes on. They all sound really good. And so we're still repairing products that we built 33 years ago.
Nice.
That people just are unwilling or unable to give up.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to earlier. How I was saying that, you still support the older stuff. I think that's pretty cool. I like this comment right here. I thought this was pretty funny.
Yeah, I saw that.
You see this one? It's not.
Yeah, so we try not to change too frequently. Although we're kind of being forced by modern technology and software updates to do it maybe a little bit more frequently than we might like.
Not log them to charge too much for their products.
Well, we charge just enough.
Just the right amount. Just the right amount. There you go.
We charge just the right amount, not too much, but then not too little, so we can stay productive and profitable and service products 33 years from now.
Yeah, it's
I
important
noticed
to make
that device it did have 4 feet on that one.
Which one was that?
That one did,
On the
because it's
NP5.
small.
Oh, the
Like
MP5
this
is
big.
small.
That one could probably just use one in the middle and then be fine. Like, boom.
Just a little bit larger diameter.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's a question
Yeah.
from KVR listening room. What is the difference between Primare CD15 and 35?
Okay. I'm assuming they're talking about the full CD players, so CD15 Prisma, CD35 Prisma. Both of them have the Prisma network player capability in them. In the case of the CD15, we're using a Philips slot load transport. And we're kind of shocked in finding this. One of the difficult things of making CD players, and you'll see fewer of them as time goes on, and especially Blu-ray players, 4K Blu-ray players. It's really hard to find drives. Really hard to find drives that not only sound good, that are reliable for the long term, but also that will be manufactured for a certain length of time. Again, our product life has a considerable length of time to it, more than a lot of other people might. And so to find the drives we used, in this case in the CD15, that slot load drive was really kind of a little bit of a miracle because it sounds great. It's really fast, it's gentle with the discs, does everything we needed to do. And maybe part of the reason it sounds so good is because of the isolation necessary, because it was designed to put in a car. So to a certain extent, that allows all of this kind of isolation inherently built into it that makes it sound absolutely fantastic. We use an AKM chip in the D to A conversion stage of that one. That'll be a little bit different from the CD35. It has unbalanced RCA output only. In the case of the CD35, that's where we use the ESS Sabre chip, that 8-channel Sabre chip, and we have balanced output as a result of that. So there's higher resolution that's available as a result of that, both the chip and the balanced output. And then we use the TIAC drive. We use a TIAC dedicated CD drive. Yeah. We have found that trying to use a multiple fat drive, we simply couldn't find the quality that we wanted. So much as we lack the ability, we feel the lack of being able to play SICD as we offered in our universal disc players, our Blu-ray players in the past. We simply had to, again, in that kind of practical design approach, go with what we felt was the best sounding, the most reliable, and that we could depend upon it being manufactured for the life of the product. That not only for the life of the product as we would be selling it, but also servicing it. I have an entire room back at Primare filled with nothing but drives.
Man,
that will never get used.
You're cutting out a little bit. Either you or me. One of us has to restart our router, I think. Here's a question. What does the logo represent?
Thank you for asking that. So if you look at the logo, it's based on the symbol for a transistor, but flipped around a little bit. And so one part of it, in fact, there's, I think, a video online of it on our website about it. I don't know if you can find it. Well, I won't tell you where to go. It'd take too long. Anyway, there is the circular part with the little triangle, and that represents control, a volume control, let's say. And then we have what looks like an A shape, the lower part of that circle, and then what looks like the little feet and the little square part, that looks like an A or alpha. If you eliminate that central piece, the lower central piece of the A, you get omega. And so what the Primare logo stands for is control from input to output. So nice. Alpha to omega. Control from alpha to omega, input to
That's
alpha.
pretty cool.
So that's what it means.
Let's see here. Get this here. David says, thanks, guys. Great live stream. Terry's one of the most knowledgeable people in high-end audio.
No, David is the most knowledgeable.
Oh, my God. Look at that.
All right. What else we got?
I was looking back through some of that. I saw quite a few comments come.
Yeah, let's run through some of these comments here in case we missed any.
Well, usually I wind up having to talk about Class D, which I'm happy to do.
And a lot of people several people asked about Class D. So let me see if I can find.
Yeah, that was way up there. And so I was gonna say, I think nowadays more and more people are understanding that Class D can be good, right? So I've heard these paired with, what were they using? Some Falcon acoustics.
Yeah.
And I thought it sounded awesome. Maybe. Yeah, I thought it sounded awesome. So I think it just depends on the implementation and, what you're using, right? So
No, implementation is key, and if you want to talk about Class D, it's almost kind of one of those things that I prefer not to, in the sense that I would prefer not to talk about any class, be it A, B, D, tubes. It really is dependent upon how you implement it, and the reason why we went with Class D, after having built for years dual, mono, massive transformer, linear power supply based AB amplifiers. We produced heavily biased, our last AB amp was heavily biased into Class A, to the point where we probably should have called it a Class A amp. We built Copeland tube electronics for many, many years. And so we know what all of these different technologies can do. And when we began to explore Class D, all of a sudden light bulbs began to go off in our heads. And we did it kind of innocently enough. We were doing a DVD compact player with DVD tuner, amplifier, integrated amp, all into one unit. And to save space, it was suggested that we use Class D just for the compactness of it. And we began to listen to it, and there were aspects of it that we really, really liked, but recognized too that there were certain limitations. But the more we investigated it, and the more we ran into different people that were doing amazing work with it, and in particular a guy by the name of Patrick Bostrom, and we began to talk to him about the potential of Class D, there was simply no other amplifier type that we could find ourselves using that met every criteria that we wanted for an amplifier. And so there were some things that needed to be overcome, but ultimately what Class D provides, in fact, I have to thank the guys at MoFi for this, John Durda and Norbert Schmid, because when I was explaining this to them, our distributors in the US, I can talk way too much, as you guys have probably already figured out, and that they were looking for a way to most easily explain what this means, or the advantages of Class D. And they came up with the best possible word: efficiency. It's all about efficiency. Not only power efficiency, power going in means power going out, the efficient delivery of that power, it's an immediate delivery of that power. There's no kind of ramping up. There's the slew rate is amazing. You have efficiency of space, efficiency of heat. And so all of these things kind of lead to this amazingly versatile kind of amplification technology. Now, the issue with it is that you have to be good at your math. It doesn't allow some of the wiggle room that you might be able to have with Class AB design. If you don't get it right, it's going to be wrong. And so with that, it's understandable then that why some people might have had, especially early on, bad impressions of Class D.
Sure.
So for example, when you're looking at a Class D amp, what you're doing there is it's all analog. That's first to understand. Our Class D implementation is all analog. And you simply provide a self-oscillating circuit that essentially oscillates the analog signal at a high speed. Early Class Ds were like at 100 megahertz or 200 if they were really advanced. So when we designed ours, we went to what we called ultra fast. We went to 300 megahertz in our UFPD designs. And in our latest UFPD2, we're at 500. And that gives us all kinds of benefits, because what happens in a Class D amp is you have this oscillation that needs to be turned into a standard analog waveform, a sine wave. And you do that with a filter. And usually what would happen is that you would have a first order filter that reduced the upper frequency amplification. So you didn't have linear amplitude from 20 hertz to 20,000. You had shocking power at low bass. I mean, just like endless delivery of power. But as the frequency rose, you had to reduce the amplitude a bit to accommodate the filter and its slope. And so you guys may remember it if you listened to early on to some of the early Class D amps, there was a signature to those early amps. You had this amazing bass and then this kind of disconnected upper frequencies. It was as if it was two different amplifiers were kind of playing at that point, which is one of the reasons why they became great for subwoofers. You didn't have to worry about their frequency. They were compact. You could put them in even the smallest subwoofer with ease. And what we found is that you increased the oscillation frequency, the intrusion of that filter was even less. And then what we did with UFPD2 is that we went it up even higher and then used a second order filter slope, not a first order slope. And then, because we had all the bass amplitude we possibly needed, we frequency balanced the amplitude. We reduced the bass just slightly so that we now have linear amplification, linear amplitude from 20 to 20,000 hertz. And the amazing thing that happens with that then is that kind of telltale Class D signature completely disappears. And you have this incredibly linear, detailed, fast, three-dimensional, ultra low noise sound that really is quite remarkable. And as much as I love AB amps, as much as I love tube amps, there's something about a Class D amp that in some ways you have to kind of customize yourself to it, acclimatize to it, because you have such lower noise. We've kind of grown accustomed to kind of a bit of noise that comes with Class AB or with tubes, or that they distort slightly differently. And once you've got that kind of overcome, the level of transparency for a Class D design can be absolutely extraordinary. Mm-hmm. You feel kind of that greater sense. The way it was originally described when we were talking about it was that you felt like you were more in the recording studio, listening to the monitors, that it's some reproduced event. And the key for us then is that what Class D allows us to do is just make the signal path so ultra short that we literally can connect the final output stage of the amplifier module directly to the 5-way binding post. Again, no wires, no solder. So when we're using things like surface mount devices, or when we're connecting to the final output stage, the 5-way binding post, we want to make sure that that connection is as pure and as uncomplicated as possible. So when you use surface mount devices, if you know what surface mount devices are, these tiny micro components that literally sit directly on the circuit board, and there's no solder there other than to hold them in place. So you don't have the little leads that come out of
right.
the
Yeah.
You don't have the solder. So you have this more direct connection. And so we have that from the input all the way to the output. We try to eliminate all of those kinds of things as much as we can. And of course, Class D allows us to do that. And then with that, and part of that is due to the lower heat, so that we have limited amounts of heat sinking required. We can put them in that position of the amplifier to have that direct connection, and we can keep our products compact and lightweight. I usually do the example, the 60 series amp that we had, 250 watts, first of our really kind of major Class D reference amplifiers. And the amp before it was the A32, which we built for 15 years. And it was a traditional Class AB design that really took two people to pick it up and move it comfortably, and that just didn't fit into any standard rack space. You always had to have something bigger to accommodate it, and it produced lots of heat as well as really great sound. But the great thing is that the A60, its replacement, its direct replacement with our Class D UFPD modules, you can hold in one hand. It's a standard size. You can put it into any rack, and it sounded better. And so we had all of these virtues kind of wrapped into one when it comes to Class D. And so it's kind of one of those cases where I think more importantly than anything else, and I'll quit talking about this technology, is exactly your point, Joe. It's implementation. It's always implementation. It's how you put these designs together that is far more important in many ways than the technology you use.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you speak just the right amount, first of all. I can't say the same for myself. But, I think the thing about Class D is that, stuff is, like you're saying, it's lighter, dissipates less heat. And so people are always skeptical. Is like, what are you giving up? You know what I mean? There must be something that you're giving up, must be sound quality, something. But you know what? Another way to think about it is, before, this is technology, right? We're talking about technology and advancement.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of technology in our phone right now that used to take an entire room, right? So what is the downside then? Because it's less expensive. It's doesn't take up a whole room, doesn't require air conditioners, all this stuff, and it's more powerful. So, you don't always have to sacrifice when it comes to technology. Sometimes it just gets better, right?
Well, and it's interesting too, because there's always that resistance sometimes to new technology, and rightly so. I mean, I remember when I had my first stereo store and I was selling Macintosh products, and it was in the late 70s. And so solid state Mac had been pretty well established, but I still had older customers bringing me in their tube Mac gear to trade in on the new solid state. And once I got through retubing, rebiasing, there was a little bit of embarrassment. I felt a little bit bad because in a lot of cases, the tube amp was outperforming the newer solid state amp because we still hadn't quite perfected solid state technology. And so I would discuss it with some of my customers after I discovered this, and they still would want the solid state to have that new technology, the greater reliability, the lower heat, that kind of stuff. So there is that kind of, again, that log on that balance between new and old technology. I'll still have guys writing me that I think are buying sound by the pound. The heavier the amplifier, the better it has to be. And the problem with that is that that weight comes from overcoming the limitations that exist with Class A/B design. The idea of having a big, massive toroid is simply because you have to have a big, massive power supply to feed the output devices necessary to produce the level of power that you're looking for. Whereas with a Class D design, in some ways you need even more power, which is why we use our heavily shielded APF-C switch mode supply. It's what fits that design best. Now, if we go to preamplifiers or CD players, there we'll use a linear supply, but we'll use an EI core transformer because actually I can have an EI core transformer design that works better in that amplification than a small toroid. But in the case of the phono stages, the toroid gives me an advantage of being able to literally tune its magnetic field for the least amount of noise to be injected into the circuit that the magnetic field might come from the toroid transformer. And so there are advantages to picking and choosing just the best technology, again, Joe, implementation, as opposed to kind of rigidly going, okay, toroid transformers are the only thing to use, or this amp technology is the only thing to use, or this D-Day conversion, DSD, PCM is the only thing to use. The interesting thing is that we're so advanced now that regardless of the technology, there's just such amazing stuff out there these days on every level, and not just from Primare.
Terry's like a wealth of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Man,
Yeah, he's
good stuff.
Another question here. So is Primare similar to driving Tesla? It kind of reminds me, it's like, I think it's because we're basic, right? So
Yeah.
the Tesla's faster than than my M3, but I need it to be loud.
Well,
If it's not loud, then it's not good.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
It's like
I
we're
need my
stuck in
amps
kind of
to be
old ways,
heavy.
right? It needs to
I
be
wanna be
heavy.
But then there's this there's joy that comes from that. So for example, I never want to be the kind of social media Nazi that'll come on and say, okay, you've got to just do this, because it's all about satisfaction. I mean, that's kind of the wonderful thing that got me into this career, into this hobby over 50 years ago. It was just there. You're celebrating your senses here. I mean, the world becomes a much more interesting place by what you can do by fooling your ear that there is someone in front of you singing, and obviously there isn't. And so if you derive pleasure from the particular, and I'm going to curl my fingers here, noise of a Class A/B amp or of a tube amp or of a Class D amplifier, then that's what you should select. Because there are a lot of people, I mean, for example, we do the comparison with Tesla. We do the idea that Class D is like a luxury performance electric car. And it just has that ability to just get up and go. And that's what Class D does. It really just, it has this amazing power. And the fact that you avoid having a transmission. You don't have shift lag, which is kind of like the transfer distortion that you get in Class A/B. But if I were to pick a car, I would pick my Honda S2000 naturally aspirated 6-speed manual car.
That's a good choice, my friend. I like that one.
And
That's
because
a good
someone said
choice.
the sound in a tunnel. Yeah, V8, the sound in a tunnel. That's awesome.
I think Legendary Brown Note would also agree with you about the S2000. He also has one of those, one of our guys here. But yeah, I think some people like metal knobs, some people like heavy amps, right?
Yeah.
So there's something for everyone. I think one of the last questions I want to address here that was asked a few times was, do you guys have a particular like a house signature, or are you going for
sound,
transparent, flat?
Yeah, I hate to be kind of cliche about it, but yeah, it's neutrality. It's being able to listen as deeply as possible into a recording. And that's what's kind of key for us, is that ability to hear as much detail as naturally as possible. But without ever having it cold and lifeless. It still needs to remain musical,
yeah.
warmth, and have a sense of life to it. And that's a really tricky balance. I remember when I was voicing, I'm pointing to an R35 prototype now. When I was voicing the phono stages, trying to balance out that level of transparency with still that sense of warmth and that sense of life that you wanted to have in that. And so while we would say there's no signature sound, there has to be, in the sense that we try to design something that you just forget about. You forget that there's technology at play in the amplification or in the production from the source of the material, and that you just start listening to music. You forget to listen to the system or the technology, would kind of be the answer to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Can we fit in one last one here from SI Services?
Sure.
Is there a follow-up to the Primare SP33 4K VM? You see that right
there, I know
right?
exactly what he's talking about. So you have to understand that I'm an old film teacher and film producer, and actually have done some work at Dolby Labs. And so surround sound is really important to us. Multi-channel sound is really important to us. And it's taken us longer to get out new models than we would have ever hoped for. However, what's coming is going to be very nice.
Pretty exciting.
Very cool. You see me getting excited about it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it in my rack that's over there too.
I was about to say he's got the prototype right over there.
Yeah. Not of the SP35, but so yeah, we'll be doing an integrated amplifier, but we're picking and choosing the technology. This is part of the modular discussion, actually, Joe, that we were talking about. Yeah. As we were producing the 4K VM module, the 4K video module, there were just all kinds of shifts and changes that were coming from the video world that meant we couldn't keep up and get out the quality of that module that we wanted to. So by the time we introduced it, we were already kind of behind. And so even though we had produced this module, we still didn't satisfy quite what was going on. And then we discovered that because our basic platform was designed 10 years ago, we were still working with 10-year-old preamplification stages or amplification stages. And then when it came right down to it, we could design a whole new product from the ground up and have it cost about the same as it would cost for us to have to install and then modify each unit to get to this level of performance. So we're doing an entire new integrated amplifier, 9-channel integrated amplifier, but it's just going to be a straight 4K. We will not care at all about 8K and 10K. That's going to be happening in your monitor. It's not going to be happening in your source. So we'll use that as your source so we can use what, Joe?
eARC.
And so we'll have eARC on that. We'll have Dirac, the ability to import Dirac and be able to use that, as well as Atmos, as well as the Prisma network player technology, all kinds of fun stuff.
Nice.
And then there'll be an 8-channel amplifier. All pairs being bridgeable. So if you like the 800 watts per channel thing, just wait till you bridge up this 8-channel amplifier.
Sean.
And that'll be with an SP35, which will be a 16-channel, fully balanced multi-channel processor.
There you go.
Ooh.
So
Dang.
They're stepping up the game.
All
Yeah, we could talk for another hour, but
I know
we're up on our time. So I think Legendary Browno probably wants to talk backstage in the VIP area about whether you have an AP1 or AP2 S2000. So talk more about AP2. Okay. And then we can get into some of that stuff you were just talking about right now. And so I left Terry, don't leave after we end this, but I left a link there to go into the VIP video chat area. So yeah. So just pop in there and hang out with us for a little bit.
There's a link that says private chat over on the right.
That's right. Terry, you did a wonderful job.
Yeah,
round of applause for Terry, ladies and gentlemen. So don't forget, everybody that is paid and attending the Hi-Fi Summit, jump into the video chat. Terry's going to be there if you have any questions directly to ask him. If you guys need tickets, go to thehiFiSummit.com, pick up a ticket, and you'll get immediate access to the video chat. And our next seminar is in an hour, 11 a.m. with I believe it's Parasound, right? Joe Finn from here. Yep. He's back with Parasound amplification, and our journey to the top continues. So we'll see you guys in the video chat and then at 11 o'clock.
Do I need to put this link in a different browser window?
Yeah. So you just hang out for a second. So Chana, you can go